Peace, family. Everybody can also drop your name, location, and pronouns in the chat, if you will, so we know how to communicate with each other and have a little background as well. And am I starting now, or I'm waiting for you to cue me? Give me the cue, Yana.
I am going to drop the link for the share, and I just want, and then you can start.
All right, peace and power, everybody. Welcome to day 11 of the Black Power. I'm sorry, the the Power Hour. But it's definitely Black Power and power to all people. You know how we do. But yeah, this is in commemoration of Black August month. And as Janae once said, we're doing Black August. And so just appreciating everybody being on here and being a part of this journey, this 21-day journey. So as we usually do, we start off with a workout and then we go into our study, just for everybody that may be viewing and is new to how we structure this. I'm going to introduce myself, and my co-facilitators will introduce themselves as well. I'm Kimber out of Philadelphia, community organizer and educator. And I'll pass it to you, Yana.
Hey, so I am Yane Indigo out of the Philadelphia part of the Navajo territory. I use she, her pronouns, and also us, we. Raphael.
Frida Land, Raphael, Rochester, New York, youth advocate, educator. Organizing with everybody I can who love freedom and who don't fear it. And so, just happy to be here in this space. On the move.
Right on. And I want to recognize our milestones too. Yesterday we surpassed halfway through Blood in My Eye. So, I want to give a big up to everybody who's been a part of this, right? We getting into this book. And so, we're going to go right into it for the sake of time. But, just want to recognize too the importance of Black August and recognizing our Black resistance movements. And just significant events, the birth of Garvey is this month. This is the month we received the RBG flag. The Haitian Revolution commenced this month. And of course, like Jonathan Jackson's revolutionary act to liberate his brother. And of course, like George Jackson, one of the reasons that we're all here, and just recognizing all political prisoners. So we're going to pass it over to Raphael so we can get right into this workout.
All right. Thank you, Kimber. All right, folks. So as usual, we're going to get started with our workout. All right, we're going to get started with stretches first. Then we'll move into some jumping jacks, followed by jogging in place. And then I think today is a good day for some push-ups as well as some punches. All right, so let's start off with our arm stretch. We'll start off across, your left arm across, tightening with your right. And whenever you're ready, Yana, you can cue the music.
All right.
I like that shirt too, Al. That's right. We got to free it. Free it on up. Yeah, legalize it for everybody. All right, other arm. 7, 8, 9, 10.
We're gonna do what's necessary, man.
What is that?
But first, understand
Right
why he's
behind
coming
your
in.
head.
What are you gonna do?
All right, we're gonna do what's necessary.
What is that?
The strategy of John Africa.
What is that?
Our only defense.
What is that?
The strategy of John Africa.
You aren't telling me anything. You're just saying the
Hey,
strategy.
I wouldn't tell my strategy to you.
Studying strategies of John Africa. Where I'm from, you a jack boy, you're a
now we're gonna do a
trafficker.
couple
Probably
hip
end
rolls,
up locked
right?
up in Attica. Cause they consider people like
let's
me
start to the right.
radical. They say I'm an animal. The Hannibal. Lecter, cause I get them people lecture.
Using your best to feel it in your hips.
Give me liberty, give me depth, sir.
Let's
Just
switch
me and
direction.
my iceberg. You can see the pain in my eyes and they bloodshot red cause I'm hot. Tired of the serve, but you just
All right. Let's do some leg stretches.
paid vacation, but
All right, so let's get some space in between your legs. Stretch them out a little bit.
dog, I get the same shit.
We're just simply gonna go to the right.
Ain't
Try to
that
stretch as far
about a
as you
bitch?
can.
Literally
Both
about a
hands keep going.
bitch. Tryna lock me in a box, but I'ma get up out of it. Letting every bullet out the clip until I'm out of it. They say I'm out of it. They say my mind gone.
All right, other direction.
Doubles say doubles a ticking time bomb. They got me all wrong. Misunderstood. Just cause I'm hood, they assume I'm up to no good. They wanna see me in that chalk outline. Cause
All right, in the middle. Straight ahead.
move now. Strategies of John Africa. Strategies of John Africa. Strategies of John Africa. Hey, I wouldn't tell my strategies to you. Strategies of John Africa.
All right, now we'll wrap it up with some neck roll. Wrap it up with some neck roll.
Strategies of John Africa. Hey, I wouldn't tell my strategies to you.
The revolution will be
Other
televised.
direction.
Blowing chocolate tie in the vanilla skies. The Bill of Rights is just a bill of lies. Know your rights is only right. You gotta stand your ground.
All right.
System
Let's
of
move
corruption.
into some
I will
jumping
never
jacks
trust.
now.
Motherfucking
We're gonna do
consequences.
1 minute.
Repercussion. I'm disgusting. No justice.
ready, young
Will
lady,
it
for
ever
jumping jacks?
change? Feeling drained. Want the
Keep on one the same song, you like keep on.
so I
We
went
can
and
switch
got
it up.
another gun. Fight the power, you public enemy number one. Never die, you coward.
We'll go back to this one.
Pennsylvania. Are you crazy about
Yeah.
the odds? We're
Yeah.
in your
Malcolm Garvey Huey
Dedicated to all political prisoners.
1 minute,
like
folks.
a movie study. Malcolm Garvey Huey. Malcolm Garvey Huey.
It's Gangsta
Malcolm
Grill,
Garvey
Gangsta
Huey.
back.
Life is like
Can you see the timer?
I die,
Yep,
I
yep.
organize.
All right.
Everything I do's
All right, 1 minute.
revolutionize. I build
Ready,
what's good
set,
for the whole damn
go.
hood. Study G's like these, really think you should. I study Malcolm Garvey Huey. Malcolm Garvey Huey. Marcia Cody with the Uzi. Listening to Fela Kuti. I'm Ogun with the machete. Especially if it's deli. Got the Santos for the hexy to protect me, so respect me. This is heavy, legendary, revolutionary. My wifey, she resurrect me when they thought they had me buried. Took me out the cemetery. Now it's family over every. Cause it's all that's necessary to avoid the commissary. I'ma live for you 5, so I stop getting high. If you know, then you recognize it's that black and brown pride. This the power of the mind. RBG, God divine. You can see through the lies if you could read between the lines.
I live, I die, I organize. Everything I do, revolutionize. I build what's good for the whole damn hood. Study G's like these, really think you should.
Study Malcolm Garvey Huey. Malcolm Garvey Huey. Study Malcolm Garvey Huey. Malcolm Garvey Huey.
Malcolm Garvey, Huey, Bunchy, Bobby, Pac, and Tukey. Sitting by the door so you
All
can
right,
see
all
me
right, all
acting
right.
spooky. Just like in the movie, son, you better
All right,
pack
make
it
sure you're
truly.
breathing.
Niggas switch be acting fruity, you'll be cracking
Gotta
like
get
they
a couple
kooky.
deep breaths
Rather
in.
smoke a doobie than
We're gonna
be
go
running
right
in the
into
looting. Bang,
running in
bang,
place.
big shooting, we should blame
A new
Rudy
song?
Julie. Yanny for
Yeah,
the
let's do it.
camera,
Let's switch
kinda
it up.
white and nose candy, let you banging on the system. You
Cause it's all revolutionary love.
I'm gonna just play whatever this one is. It's in our list, if that's okay,
Yeah.
just so we can.
All right, 1 minute. Running in place. Ready? Set. Go.
Abracadabra, here I come. Magic bitch styling. Move like magic excellence. Poof, you need reminding. Getting round and losing some. Uma, when she back again. You will never end the rain. We keep multiplying. Running through the evidence. There's just no denying. Some be by different shot. It just keep on shining. Ooh, that lady got some lip. From my mama got the gift. We just pour some peace in it. At least we keep on trying. Hold on, my youth. Hold on, my youth. I told you I was coming. I gave you for warning. For I'm just for one man. Hold on, my youth. Hold on, my youth. I told you I was
right, all right. Good job, everybody. Move.
Let's see what's here.
Right. All right, so next we're gonna move into our push-ups. So as usual, you can do your standard push-up, straight body on the ground, pushing up. You can bend your knees, do those short leg push-ups. You can also do your planks and just hold yourself up straight up, or you can get on your forearms and do your planks as well, hold yourself up. Or if you need to, you can get on the wall. You simply push yourself up over an incline, all right? We always encourage, just do what you can. This is not a race, all right? So at 1 minute, let's go ahead and get started. Ready? Go.
I remember when Danny them get my snow cone and make him lick a bread of them, kick up Jerome. I remember when we visit them with pure big stone and the boy Danny pop out something we're full chrome. I remember when we run, but I get him knee blown and my best friend Richie get doing I'm down. I remember Sunday Avenue turning a war zone and Mikey mother fly him out cause she get alone. Mikey got too foreign and got on Al Capone. Make one leap of money and send me no I won't know how we all lock the city and that is well known. Yesterday Mikey called me on my phone. Me say Mikey, we get the thing them out of luck now. We squeeze 7 and the whole of them I don't know. Me a bully for extra cause we not rock now.
We got the kingdom, so they have to make way. We take it from the bottom to the top, baby. And now the whole community can live greatly. I remember those days when we was dead broken. I could barely find a dollar for a token. Hop in the train just to get where I'm going.
All right, last but not least, we're gonna throw a few punches. Again, just to kind of keep ourselves loose. Keep ourselves in a good position of self-defense. So as you guys know, just make sure you have some good grounding with your feet, not too flat foot where you can't move, but on your toes enough where you have some mobility, right? So again, we're just gonna do this for 1 minute. Straight punches, you do a combination, whatever works for you and whatever is at your level of punching.
Ready?
Yep. Ready, set, go.
Who you calling a bitch? Another flow. Every time I hear a brother call a girl a bitch or a hoe, trying to make a sister feel low, you know all of that got to go. Now everybody knows there's exceptions to this rule. I don't be getting mad when we playing, it's cool, but don't you be calling me out my name. I bring rap to those who disrespect me like a dame. That's why I'm talking. One day I was walking down a block, I had my cut off shorts on, right, cause it was crazy hot. I walked past these dudes when they passed me. One of them felt my booty, he was nasty. I turned around red, somebody was catching a rat. Then the little one said, yeah, me, bitch. And laughed. Since he was with his boys, he tried to break fly. I punched him dead in his eyes, said, who you calling a bitch?
All right. Good job, everybody. All right, so at this point, I will turn it back over to Kimber, and he'll prepare us for our small break.
Hey, right on. So we're going to take a couple of minutes, get ourselves together, catch our breath, drink some water. Then when we come back, we're going to get into this study, George Jackson, Blood in My Eye. I want to encourage everybody too to share the link. Also share the registration link to get other people in your circle involved. We still have 10 more days left in the study. Also, want to encourage anybody that's viewing this on YouTube now or after the fact to definitely join us. Register at Eventbrite, join us and be a part of this study. And share the link with your friends and family.
So there's a timer on.
This is the Black August Power Hour.
So there's a timer on.
Black August Power Hour. Very excited about this read today. We're past the 100-page mark. Looking forward to another great discussion, I should say. Was that the 2-minute mark, or I was hearing something else?
Yeah, that's 2 minutes. Can you hear me? Am I muted?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
All right. So if everybody is back, do we have our reader in place? Raphael, you with us?
I'm reading today.
Yep, I'm here. Yep.
Right on. So this is the part where we're going to get back into this book, Blood in My Eye, and then we'll have a discussion after the reading. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Raphael.
Okay, Yane, are you going to be reading today, or you want me to do it?
Yeah, I was prepared to read. Maybe I had made
I'm sorry. Yane, you passed it over. Was y'all telling me that, and I was just ignoring y'all?
I don't know.
Raphael.
Hey, Kim, but we've been telling you, man, you've been so hooked in this workout today, man. You've been missing a lot of things, brother. No joke.
Right. So we're
No.
gonna pass it over to Yane, and she gonna, get into this read. That's what's up.
Yeah, I feel like I hear music. I don't know. It's probably me.
Yeah, I hear something.
I stopped it. It was me. All right. So we are starting on the first full paragraph that begins in the middle of page 100. It starts with Jonathan. Okay. Jonathan, my younger brother, understood this point perfectly. All right, I'm going to just read like a little bit from the previous one since he's referencing that paragraph. Bourgeois law protects property relations and not social relationships. The cultural traits of capitalist society that also tend to check activity, individualism, artificial politeness juxtaposed to an aloof rudeness, the rush to learn how to instead of what is, are secondary really, and intended for those mild cases and groups that require preventative measures only. The law and everything that interlocks with it was constructed for poor, desperate people like me. Jonathan, my younger brother, understood this point perfectly. The purport of the raid on the Marin County courthouse was more significant by far than its calculable effects. I knew him well, since he was and still is my alter ego. He went to liberate and to educate with aggressive and free action. He knew that as he proceeded in liberating, there would be more action. He wasn't a speech maker, and neither am I. Escape from the myth, the hoax, by moving people into action against the terror of the state, counterterrorism, is the real significance of the August 7th affair. To Jonathan, the striking exposure was audacity, audacity, and more audacity. Theory and practice, strategy and tactics were based in his mind on actual confrontation within this particular historical development. He must have calculated that focal army activity that was hidden and nameless, operating where the objective conditions for for revolution already existed and had existed for a dozen decades, would survive and grow if at the same time the Black Panther Party apparatus continued to develop its autonomous infrastructure. Proof of his theory was built right into the action. 5 desperate men were offered arms as a means to freedom. 3 took them. Proof of the role of law within the totalitarian authoritarian relationship was also built into the action. In a fit of reckless, mindless gunfire, 100 automated goons shot through the bodies of a judge, district attorney, and 3 female non-combatants to reestablish control over all activity. To prevent certain actions, no cost in blood is too high. It was seen that so much free fire would be difficult to explain, but it is not. Freedoms are invariably being protected with this gunfire. Freedom must then be interpreted 1,000 separate ways, but it actually comes down to freedom for a few families and their friends, freedom to prey upon the world. Acceptance of enslavement is deeply buried in the pathogenic character types of capitalism. It is a result of the sense of dread and anxiety, which is the lot of all men under capitalist rule. Compulsive behavior and disordered obsessional longings are actually made synonymous with character in our disordered society. But to emphasize these conditions before examining the institutions from which they spring is to confuse effect with cause and further cloud the point of attack. So far, cultural analysis has been established that the psychosis is so ingrained, the institution so centralized, that what is needed is total revolution, the armed struggle between the have-nots with their vanguard and the haves with their hirelings and macabre freaks that live through them. Civil war between at least 2 sections of the population is the only purgative. Total revolution must be aimed at the purposeful and absolute destruction of the state and all present institutions, the destruction carried out by the so-called psychopath, the outsider, whose only remedy is destruction of the system. This organized massive violence directed at the source of thought control is the only realistic therapy. Analysis of the oppressed mentality and the psychopathic personality that accrue from contact with the prevarications of American culture must be carefully integrated with the analysis of the source. Simple interpretation of effects tends to calcify. If certainty promotes defeat, it certainly promotes defeatism. Action makes the front. One can quietly refuse to accept the constructions of bourgeois culture, can reject himself, hate the self, and turn inward. By so doing, he accomplishes a form of individual revolt. But here again, we find another unconscious manifestation of the thing we hate, individualism, a now attitudinal instrumentality of bourgeois culture. We cannot escape. One simply cannot reject constrictions without rejecting and putting to death the constrictor. An armed attacker cannot be ignored. Gandhi and the Gurus were all abject fools. I would certainly be dead if, when critical flashpoints matter, I hadn't packed my rejection with blows. I would hate to have been a Vietnamese in my life without arms. I hate encounters like the one at my last court appearance on April 6, 1971. It says here, on April 6, 1971, a preliminary hearing of the Soledad brothers' murder trial, a bailiff persisted in jabbing George in the ribs despite repeated warnings. Finally, Jackson wheeled around and decked the plaintiff with a karate blow to the head. I hate encounters like the one in my last court appearance on April 6, 1971, when the enemies who attacked me had all the weapons. I would hate to run into freaks who have Mike Hammer, J. Edgar Hoover complexes without being armed. My pledge is to arms. My enemies are institutions and any men with vested interest in them, even if that interest is only a wage. A revolution means civil war. I accept, and the sooner begun, the sooner done. I don't think the enemy can be identified any more carefully than this. Further identification must be made in the process. I feel elated that my brother died with 2 guns in hand. I'm going to miss him and all the others, though death in our situation is only a release. I miss people intensely. I miss him intensely, but he and the others who sought freedom died at the throat of the principal repressive institute of the empire. They died making real attempts at freedom. I paraphrase Castro on trial after Moncada. I warn you, gentlemen, I have only begun. Toward the United Front. A unitarian and progressive current has sprung up in the movement centering on political prisoners. How can this unitarian conduct be developed further in the face of determined resistance from the establishment? How can it be used to isolate reactionary elements? Unitary conduct implies a search for those elements in our present situation, which can become the basis for joint action. It involves a conscious reaching for the relevant, the intente, and especially in our case, the reconcilable. Throughout the centralizing authoritarian process of American history, the ruling classes have found it necessary to discourage and punish any genuine opposition to hierarchy. There have always been individuals and groups who rejected the ideal of two unequal societies existing one on top of the other. The men who place themselves above the rest of society through guile, fortuitous outcome of circumstance, and sheer brutality have developed two principal institutions to deal with any and all serious disobedience: the prison and institutionalized racism. There are more prisons of all categories in the United States than in all other countries of the world combined. At all times, there are 2/3 of a million people or more confined to these prisons. Hundreds are destined to be legally executed, thousands more quasi-legally. Other thousands will never again have any freedom of movement, barring a revolutionary change in all the institutions that combine to make up the order of things. 1/3 of a million people may not seem like a great number compared with the total population of 200 million. However, compared with the 1 million who are responsible for all the affairs of men within the extended state, it constitutes a striking contrast. What I want to explore now are a few of the subtle elements that I have observed to be standing in the path of a much needed united front, non-sectarian, to effectively reverse the legitimized ripoff. Prisons were not institutionalized on such a massive scale by the people. Most people realize that crime is simply the result of a grossly disproportionate distribution of wealth and privilege, a reflection of the present state of poverty relations. There are no wealthy men on death row, and so few in the general prison population that we can discount them altogether. Imprisonment is an aspect of class struggle from the outset. It is the creation of a closed society which attempts to isolate those individuals who disregard the structures of a hypocritical establishment, as well as those who attempt to challenge it on a mass basis. Throughout its history, the United States has used its prisons to suppress any organized efforts to challenge its legitimacy, from its attempts to break up early working man's benevolent association to the banning of the Communist Party, during what I regard as the fascist takeover of this country, to the attempt to destroy the Black Panther Party. The hypocrisy of American fascism forces it to conceal its attack on political offenders by the legal fiction of conspiracy laws and highly sophisticated frame-ups. The masses must be taught to understand the true function of prisons. Why do they exist in such numbers? What is the real underlying economic motive of crime and the unofficial definition of types of offenders or victims? The people must learn that when one offends the totalitarian state, it is patently not an offense against the people of that state, but an assault upon the privilege of the privileged few. Could anything be more ridiculous than the language of blatantly political indictments, the people of the state versus Angela Davis and Rochelle McGee, or the people of the state versus Bobby Seale and Erica Hudgens? What people? Clearly the hierarchy, the armed minority. We must educate the people in the real causes of economic crimes. They must be made to realize that even crimes of passion are the psychosocial effects of an economic order that was decadent 100 years ago. All crime can be traced to objective social economic conditions, socially productive or counterproductive activity. In all cases, it is determined by the economic system, the method of economic organization. The people of the state versus John Doe is as tenuous as the clearly political frame-ups. It's like stating the people versus the people, man against himself. Official definitions of crime are simply attempts by the establishment to suppress the forces of progress. Prisoners must be reached and made to understand that they are victims of social injustice. This is my task working from within. While I'm here, my persuasion is that the war goes on no matter where one may find himself on bourgeois-dominated soil. The sheer numbers of the prison class and the terms of existence make them a mighty reservoir of revolutionary potential. Working alone and from within a steelly enclosed society, there is very little that people like myself can do to awake the restrained potential revolutionary outside the walls. That is a part of the task of the prison movement. The prison movement, the August 7th movement, and all similar efforts educate the people in the legitimacy of establishment power and hint at the ultimate goal of revolutionary consciousness at every level of struggle. The goal is always the same, the creation of an infrastructure capable of fielding a people's army. Each of us should understand that revolution is aggressive. The manipulators of the system cannot or will not meet our legitimate demands. Eventually, this will move us all into a violent encounter with the system. These are the terminal years of capitalism. And as we move into more and more basic challenges to its rule, history clearly forewarns us that when the prestige of power fails, a violent episode precedes its transformation. We can attempt to limit the scope and range of violence and revolution by mobilizing as many partisans as possible at every level of socioeconomic life. But given the hold that the ruling class has on this country and its history of violence, nothing could be more certain than civil disorder, perhaps even civil war. I don't dread either. There are no good aspects of monopoly capital, so no reservations need to be recognized in its destruction. Monopoly capital is the enemy. It crushes the life force of all the people. It must be completely destroyed as quickly as possible, utterly, totally, ruthlessly, relentlessly destroyed. With this as a common major goal, it was seen that anti-establishment forces will find little difficulty in developing common initiatives and methods consistent with the goals of mass society. Regretfully, this has not been the case. Only the prison movement has shown any promise of cutting across ideological, racial, and cultural barricades that have blocked the natural coalition of left-wing forces at all times in the past. So this movement must be used to provide an example for the partisans engaged at other levels of struggle. The issues involved in the dialectic which flows from an understanding of the clear, objective existence of overt oppression could be the springboard for our entry into the tide of increasing worldwide socialist consciousness. In order to create a unified left, whose aim is the defense of political prisoners and prisoners in general, we must renounce the idea that all participants must be of one mind and should work at the problem from a single party line or with a single party line or with a single method. The reverse of this is actually desirable. From all according to ability, each partisan outside of the vanguard element should work at radicalizing in the areas of their natural environment, the places where they pursue their work, their normal lives, when not attending the rallies and demonstrations. The vanguard elements, organized party workers of all ideological persuasions, should go among the people concentrated at the rallying point with the consciousness raising strategy, promoting commitment and providing concrete, clearly defined activity. The vanguard elements must search out people who can and will continue to the building of the commune, the infrastructure with pen and clipboard in hand. From those who aren't ready to take that step, a packet of pamphlets should be provided for their education. All of this, of course, means that we are moving and on a mass level, not all in our separate directions, but firmly under the disciplined and principled leadership of the vanguard Black Panther Communist Party. One simply cannot act without a head. Democratic centralism is the only way to deal effectively with the American ordeal. The Central Committee of the People's Vanguard Party must make its presence felt throughout the various levels of the overall movement. With the example of unity in the prison movement, we can begin to break the old behavior patterns that have repeatedly allowed bourgeois capitalism, its imperialism, and fascism to triumph over the last several decades. We tap a massive potential reservoir of partisans for cadre work. We make it possible to begin to address one of the most complex psychosocial byproducts that economic man with his private enterprise has manufactured: racism. I've saved this most critical barrier to our need of unity for last. Racism is a matter of ingrained traditional attitudes conditioned through institutions. For some, it is as natural a reflex as breathing. The psychosocial effects of segregated environments compounded by bitter class repression have served in the past to render the progressive movement almost totally impotent. The major obstacle to a unified left in this country is white racism. There are three categories of white racism: the overt, self-satisfied racist who doesn't attempt to hide his antipathy, the self-interdictating racist who harbors and nurtures racism in spite of his best efforts, and the unconscious racist who has no awareness of his racist preconceptions. I deny the existence of Black racism outright. By fiat, I deny it. Too much Black blood has flowed between the chasm that separates the races. It's fundamentally unfair to expect the Black man to differentiate at a glance between the various kinds of white races. What the apologists term Black racism is either a healthy defense reflex on the part of sincere Black partisan who is attempting to deal with the realistic problems of survival and elevation, or the racism of the government stooge organs. Black partisans, we must recognize and allow for the existence of all three types of races. We must understand their presence as an effect of the system. It is a system that must be crushed, for it continues to manufacture new and deeper contradictions of both class and race. Once it is destroyed, we may be able to address the problem of racism at an even more basic level, but we must also combat racism while we are in the process of destroying the system. The self-interdicting racist, no matter what his acquired conviction or ideology, will seldom be able to contribute with his actions in any really concrete way. His role in revolution, barring a change of basic character, will be minimal throughout. Whether the basic character of a man can be changed at all is still a question. But we have an immediacy of the issues in question, the perfect opportunity to test the validity of materialist philosophy again, because we don't have to guess, we have the means of proof. The need for a Unitarian conduct goes much deeper than the liberation of Angela, Bobby, Erica, McGee, Luciette, Tijerina, white draft resistors, and now the indomitable and faithful James Carr. We have fundamental strategy to be proved and tested and proved. The activity surrounding the protection and liberation of people who fight for us is an important aspect of the struggle, but it is important only if it provides new initiatives that redirect and advance the revolution under new progressive methods. There must be a collective redirection of the old guard, the factory and union agitator, with the campus activists who can counter the ill effects of fascism at its training site, and with the lumpen proletariat intellectuals who possess revolutionary scientific socialist attitudes to deal with the masses of street people already living outside the system. They must work toward developing the unity of the pamphlet and the silenced pistol. Black, brown, and white are all victims together. At the ends of this massive collective struggle, we will uncover our new man, the unpredictable culmination of the revolutionary process. He will be better equipped to wage the real struggle, the permanent struggle after the revolution, the one for new revolutions between men. The one for new relationships between men. All right, and I'll stop there. I'll turn it back over to you.
Hey, right on. This is another powerful read. We have, just give people a heads up, 18 minutes to the top of the hour, but we, depending on the flow of the conversation, we could take a little time after the top of the hour and keep the discussion going. So I just want to open it up to anybody who has any questions or comments that they want to make in regards to what we just read. We can, just open it up. You can raise your hand. I guess that would be in a more organized fashion, but you can just, if you have something to say, you can also just unmute your mic. I would say one thing though, just to get the conversation flowing. I like how George Jackson, in this particular section, he raised the need for us to not just tackle the effects of the system, but to go at like the root. I personally think like colonial capitalism is that root, to all of the other issues that we're dealing with within the system. So even with like racism, this is something that we do have to tackle head on, but understanding it's a product, and at least from my analysis, that it's a product of the the system, because we're dealing with like material impact of colonial capitalism. Like these are like material conditions that we're dealing with, and so I just wanted to put that out there and maybe get the conversation flowing.
One thing that that I was appreciating was the conversation around like the clipboard conversation. And, you know, it's not something that we don't know, that we haven't talked about in our meetings, that we need to get engaged with, you know, people have call to actions, things when we have actions, and like, not just like send people home with nothing. But I think that reading it and in the context of this whole larger conversation that George has been having with us, and you know, thinking it out from like the idea of like the vanguard and the role of the vanguard and the goals and like what the collective goals should be, and the conversation around like everyone doing their part, within the context of like building towards revolution, in the ways that he's talked about, like with some of the long-term, you know, actions and activities in mind. You know, I think it's helpful to like hear it again and process it in the context of this conversation, this idea of the clipboard and just connecting with the people. So that's one thing that I appreciate it. I'm wondering if other people have thoughts about this from the place of like what organizing looks like, or if there are ways that you feel like some of the things that we talked about here maybe would translate to like direct organizing that we're involved in as well.
Yeah, Raphael, if y'all see someone raising their hand, because I am on my phone, y'all see someone raise their hand, y'all can acknowledge them. I might not see it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. I'll add on to what Yane has mentioned. I think it kind of aligns. I really value that idea of his comment from all according to ability. And even when we think about, I guess, an infrastructure or a collective who's trying to bring about some revolutionary change, I think it's important just to remember that we all don't have to think the same way. You know, we can come from different places, backgrounds, even religions, you know, but just knowing that that notion from all according to ability, whatever strengths, abilities we can contribute to revolutionary change, I think is important. And then I wanted to make one more brief comment about your thought, Ikemba. I think a lot of times too, you know, it's rare that we really think about racism like as an effect, you know, a byproduct of this sort of corporate fascism or capitalism. And I don't know, sometimes it's easy to miss the ball only focusing on racism without, I guess, connecting that intersectionality between racism, class, and whatever other intersectionalities might exist. So I really appreciated his depiction about that. Sophia, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you all for doing this. This is actually my first time being able to get on, so I appreciate the information and everything that we have done since the start of the hour. I think just really quickly, I feel that the mentioning of where he's talking about like the revolution and just laying out the bare elements of it and what it will, you know, what will be expected, and being in a situation where we saw what last year brought in the streets and we're still in the fight for our lives. I think it was just important how he laid out the elements and made it clear, because we're still talking about that today. We're still having those conversations and we're still having those struggles of how it should be, and the verses reform versus, you know, like revolution and all those conversations. So that was interesting to see how these conversations just continue to evolve, and how we these kinds of studies and elements of having moments like this in in our society today is really important because we get to go back to some of the basics that sometimes get a bit hidden in our fight.
Yeah, right on. Speaking of even like reform, and going back to what Raphael was mentioning in regards to racism, the fight against racism itself, you know what I'm saying, by itself is sort of like a reformist. You have some sort of like reform within the system, the colonial capitalist system. When you're just fighting against racism, it doesn't change the structure of the colonial capitalist system. Like the dynamic still remains the same. You have white people that will even concede racism, exists. But if you ask them to fight along with you by your side to like revolutionize the system, they nowhere to be found. But I think that's an important distinction, I think, to be made between racism and colonial capitalism, being two different systems, but working in tandem though. So it's important to recognize that. Did anyone else had a hand up? I'm sorry, I can't see it.
I wanted to say something. Oh, and I think I want to say something too. I can't hear you. We can't hear you, Al. It doesn't look like you're muted, but we can't hear you. Nope, still can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. I wanted to say, I'm glad he moved to the racism and that he addressed like the different types of white people and identified like which ones that wouldn't be able to help because, they don't even like believe in racism, but then actually identify what white people that you might could convert to help in the struggle, you know what I mean? And broke it down in 3 classes to give you like the ones who you might could turn and get in the fight. I could appreciate that. He really thought deep on all levels, you know what I mean? And then, as we go deeper in the book, it's just good to see him like just keep going further and further into the thought process of what it would look like. I can just appreciate that they even addressed, because when you look at it from the Black Panthers and everything, it's almost like a Black thing. But if it's going to be a whole revolution, it's going to have to be everybody. So, we don't want it to turn into a race war. And if you do, it do. But I mean, just the fact that he even thought about what white people would be the ones to go for that could actually, that wouldn't be receptive and that would be receptive. I can just appreciate, that he went that deep, and that's it.
Yeah, actually, connected to that whole thing, I was thinking about, first of all, I think of racism like as a tool of like the capitalist state. I think of it like a saw, and like, you have men and they make saws and then they go use them to cut down trees. And then if the trees were to attack the saw, then the men would just be able to manufacture more saws. The trees, if they wanted to stop being sawed down, would have to attack the men. I think of the racism as like the saw that was manufactured by this system. It's perpetuated by this imperialist, capitalist system. And I feel like that's a part of that's what I was hearing George saying, is it relates to like getting to the source. Otherwise you're not actually, and that's also to the point that, you were making as well, Raphael, about it not being able, if you fight racism alone, then that's just reform, right? Like that's just that comment, because you're not actually, the only thing that is revolution is completely turning over the system, and eliminating racism is not overturning the system, and you can't eliminate racism unless you overturn the system. So, I appreciated that. And then also as it relates to the comment of like everybody, you know, to their ability, you know, that coupled within a context of like what I was talking about around like where white, you know, what different kinds of ways white people show up as it relates to racism, and the specifics of like white people, because they are like the face of power, they are the, you know, the top of the hierarchy inside of this particular context. And I think that part of that, like that, how the pathology of whiteness shows up in white people is one of the things that has to be sorted out when we're thinking about where, like the place, you know, that different people and different white people may have in the context of struggle, back again to like the whole matrix effect idea that I was talking about before, and how, you know, the programming of the system causes people to actually become agents of the state unwittingly, and, you know, and become people that you have to fight with within the context, or who like redirect things, for example, towards reform, you know, in the context of the work that we're doing. And I think that everybody has the potential to end up becoming an agent in that way, and everyone can be, you know, end up personifying the matrix effect. But I think that there are the people who are closest to the source of power, white people and people who are presenting white, and men, and particularly white men, are the ones who are most fertile for that, for being, for operating in that way.
Yeah, right on, right on. Just to let everybody know too, we got 4 minutes to the top of the hour. If you have to drop off, you can. You want to further the discussion on this, we may stay, you know, about 10-15 minutes after the hour to continue on. So anybody else wanted to add on to what was discussed, or anything that you came across in the book?
I see your hand, Susan. You want to jump in there?
Yeah. So one question and one comment. I'll start with a comment because it's more complicated. So, you know, to me, George's defining 3 kinds of racists is useful, but doesn't capture the whole quality of the whole power of racism. And, you know, since George's lifetime, there's been a lot of attempts at differentiating between psychological racism and institutional racism. So I don't think he exactly addresses that, but so I don't think that covers all the different forms of racism, white racism. I like the fact that he says clearly and unequivocally, I deny the existence of Black racism outright. And, you know, that comes up again and again in dialogues, and frustrating dialogues where there's an expectation that it's equal, that you can analyze white racism the same way as Black racism. And he said, he's basically saying there's no comparison, that the level, you know, too much Black blood has flowed. And I think that's good to always restate. But I'm frustrated a little bit about the definitions of racism. So that's my comment. The question, which is open to clarification, of course, from others. The question I had is on the previous page, 110, and I think I've seen it before, the formula, the label of the Vanguard Black Party, Panther Communist Party. And there's construction in my building, if you're hearing sound. So I'm not, I just want to know historically, does the Vanguard Black Panther Communist Party, is that his formulation? Have other people, other revolutionaries? I don't remember that formulation, and I think it's interesting if he's merging the concept of a communist party with the Black Panther Party. You know, I want to know that, and whether there's any argument for it somewhere else or anything like that, or have folks seen other people combine those two organizational forms together before.
What page is that on?
Black Panther Communist Party, Vanguard is on page 110, and it's the next to last paragraph. It's in the paragraph that starts. All of this, of course, means that we are moving and on a mass level. And he's talking about, I think also, yeah, democratic centralism, which also is complicated, as we've seen it in the last 30, 40 years in the different struggles, how democratic centralism has been used, misused, defined, et cetera, et cetera.
One thing I'll mention in regards to his use of the Black Panther Vanguard Communist Party is I know I've been involved in some political education about the Black, brown, yellow, even white formations during that period. And one thing that I noticed that was pretty clear was all of those formations were sort of guided by the Black Panther Party's formation. So in other words, if you go to any of their platform and their programs, many of them, and this is just my perspective, I mean, there might be other arguments, many of them were extension of the Black Panther Party's initial program. So from that vantage point, it becomes clear that not only George Jackson's perspective, but even these different groups I just mentioned were deeming the Black Panther Party as that vanguard communist party.
So it's not the particular communist party, it's a concept that he's trying to unify. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think the practical element versus just theoretical. You know, when you look at it, even for example, the Rainbow Coalition, despite the several groups that were involved, it was still the Black Panther as that vanguard who initiated it. So you know, maybe not to get too caught up in the language and theory, but even just a close analysis of history, you know, it would kind of show that the Panthers were,
the vanguard.
You know, they were the vanguard. Another comment I wanted to make, and this will be brief, was about his comment, money capital, you know, is the enemy. And I think one of my values about that is that he goes on and kind of helps us understand that the prison movement has been one of the, in his sense, ideal frameworks for really creating the infrastructure to address the money capital as the enemy. And if we're really honest about what is the prison, you know, what is that complex and how does it benefit the controllers of corporate fascist capital, it begins to make a lot of sense why we should start there as sort of a guide to ending, money capital as an enemy. So I just wanted to make sure to make that comment.
Indeed. Did anybody else want to respond? And I would just say,
yeah, I had a couple of thoughts, and there's nobody else who has their hand raised. But before I share my thoughts, I want to just give a second in case somebody does want to say something, since I've said a couple things. Okay. So there's two things that I was thinking about. One, as it relates to Suzanne's frustration around the definition of racism. And I want to look a little bit more at this, but so this is just kind of like how I'm thinking about this and reading this right now. But I'm thinking that the three types, if you look at these as three, like that, these are three buckets that like other ways that racism shows up, or like other subcategories can fall into, but that like within the context of this country, like white racism is inescapable. And there are people who, like amongst all white people, and then there are people who address it, who fight, deal with it, do the internal work, and constantly recognizing that, it's a lot to overcome, may not be able to be overcome, but they're doing that work. And I feel that those are amongst the people that that George is suggesting we can work with, as opposed to those who don't recognize it at all, who walk around and they're just like, no, I don't see color, and they don't even know and can't identify their racism, so they can't confront it. And then those who just are walking around like, yeah, give me a hood. And so I think of it like as a kind of like an overarching, kind of categorization under which many other kinds of understandings can be further discussed. So I don't know, that was my thinking. I don't know, Suzanne, if I'm communicating that well, but I'm particularly, thinking about what you said. So the other thing that I wanted to also like go back to is when he talks about the role of law, and that its primary role is control of the masses. And he talks about that on page 101 at the beginning of this section that we read today, that it's control, and that's why the laws don't get applied to the people who are in like the ruling classes or the people who work to the benefit of that class. That's why, for example, police can murder people with impunity in ways that people who are not police can, because they play such an integral role in, protecting the system. And so even though they are not valuable, their role is valuable in, helping the system to maintain control over the masses. And that's the role of the prisons. So I just really, also just like wanted to like touch on that again. And particularly I'm thinking about in one of his books, Mumia also describes that. Like I think that I can't quote him in explicit exactly, but he says something like, law exists as whatever the white man wanted it to be, which is exactly whatever it is that he needed it to be at one time or the other. The law was always changing and based on the circumstance and situation and what's beneficial. So it just could be whatever they wanted, because it is like racism, just another tool. These laws are, and it's interesting because so many people operate and engage as if these laws have legitimacy just because they exist, just because we were born into these laws, but like we didn't agree to this shit and it's bullshit. And we just operate like this is what we have to do. We don't have any choice. Yes. So, yeah, that's one of the things that I was just thinking about, that I think about this all the time, actually, like even when it comes to like paying for parking, them thinking they have the right to take our cars. Hey, Tone, them being allowed to take our children, like all of the things that they do to us, that they do it and they say that they have the right to do it because of these laws, and the laws are invalid. Like the entire thing is completely invalid, and we just like subject ourselves to it. And we need to just be like, no, like no to your laws, like, and begin to practice based on our own laws that are like in the service, in the interest of life. And, and that care for all people. Like we should be creating, like we keep going to them and asking them to create laws that we like. We should be creating our own laws and then living by them and holding ourselves to them. And so, yeah, everything about like that part of it, and just the role of the law and the role of the prisons and all of those things, that was something else that I appreciated.
Indeed, indeed. We're at the 109 mark. And to see if anybody else had any comments or questions before we begin to wind down. Also want to say, like, I think, like, oh, go.
But we can't hear you again, Al, but.
The part where the bailiff kept, when he was in court, even in court, the bailiff keeps sticking him in the ribs and he hit him with the karate chop, showing you like he stood up to this. He was the type of boy that, he never gave the bailiffs or the prison officials or nobody like a rest. So, you can understand why they felt they had to take him out. Like he in court, he gonna karate chop a bailiff. You know what I mean? They keep fucking with him. I just wanted to acknowledge that. I thought that was, just to show his character.
I loved it.
Right on, right on. That's us, man. They keep poking us in the rib. You know what I'm saying? But that's how we gotta respond, and we have been responding like that. At least on a small scale. But we gotta become more organized. But I was going to even speak to the Democratic. So it's just like important. When we work for any of these institutions, any institution that we're a part of, there is sort of that hierarchy of democratic centralism. It's like, the people voting on a particular direction to go, and it's up to a particular path to take, a particular direction to go in, and it's up for the vanguard to carry out, what the people decided on. And so, that's democratic centralism right there. There's corruption, of course, like in any institution, democratic centralism, you have people who, make claims to practice that. You have people who are in positions, of power and they, can be corrupted. But I think we need that sort of centralism in any type of war that we carry on, so that everybody is moving in at least in one direction. But I just wanted to raise that. Did anybody else wanted to say anything before we close out?
I just wanted to also appreciate the way that he again remembered Jonathan.
Yeah, Jonathan is like, and him.
Thanks for bringing that up, Yane.
Yeah, his appreciation of Jonathan and the Revolutionary Act that he missed him, but he's uplifting his actions, which is very important. You know what I'm saying? Like, because that if he criticized Jonathan Jackson, he seemed to just like upset and wish that he didn't do it. That, like, how would we look at that? You know what I'm saying? Like, we would question our own, decisions to carry on the Revolutionary Act. So I think it's important that he does like uplift that and talk about how proud he is doing what he did.
Yeah, that makes me think of that movie Queen and Slim. Remember in Queen and Slim when the little boy went up to the police officer and to shoot him and got killed? That was the exact opposite. That's one of the moments that infuriated me in that movie, because it took these people, they were being revolutionary in the most like undesired kind of way. Like they had to just save their lives. They were going, to be, there was the danger of him being murdered, and and the protection of his life. And that, is put down into like, look at what you did. You caused this little boy to do this thing and get like, you know what I mean? Like, as opposed to like acknowledging, like it just communicated that this is not worth it. It's the exact opposite kind of message, that was in there.
Yeah, right on. Wanted to see Kay, Sophia, and Tone. Well, I know Sophia, you had mentioned something earlier, but if y'all wanted to say something before we closed out, want want to give y'all that opportunity. And,
No, I think
yeah,
this
go
is
ahead.
just, yeah, thank you. I think this is just a very fruitful discussion that really hit some deep elements just now. So I'm just taking it all in, and definitely in agreement with the humanity side of things. I think sometimes as we do this revolutionary work, we're in the struggle, the humanity of who we are gets erased or sidelined. And to see that in this writing, and to also hear us acknowledging that is key. We basically have to acknowledge that for our own selves, because the system never will. So that's just my last piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Kay, Tone. Sophia, you're a new name, so I keep on focusing on your name. But Kay, Tone, did y'all want to add anything before we roll out? All right, no pressure. So tomorrow, though, same time, we're going to be back here. And I want to encourage y'all again to, share and definitely come back as we continue to get our workout and our stuff on. I don't know if Yane and Raphael, did y'all want to say anything before we end the session?
I just enjoyed the discussion. Hope everyone has a beautiful revolutionary day full of their power.
Yeah, the same with me too. I don't know, Sophia, you made me think about the importance of us not accepting our genocide as part of our humanity. And I think oftentimes it's taught that us being passive and being peaceful and non-responsive is being human, where I'm actually better understanding how unhumane, subhuman that position can be. So thanks for saying what you said, Sophia, and everybody's comments and love. On the move.
On the move.
On the move.
All right, on the move. All right, so I'm looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Y'all